Most people spend years asking, as if love were a competition. As if someone stood beside you with a scorecard, comparing your kindness against someone else's beauty, your loyalty against someone else's excitement, but that's almost never how it happens. The terrifying truth is that people rarely leave because someone else is objectively better. They leave because someone else made them feel like a different version of themselves. And once you understand that, you'll never look at rejection the same way again. Because the day they chose someone else wasn't the day you lost to another person. It was the day you discovered something far more disturbing. People don't always choose who loves them the most. They choose the person who matches the emotional reality they're living inside. That is the part no one tells you. And it explains almost everything. One of the cruelest illusions about love is believing that effort naturally becomes value. You assume every sacrifice is being remembered, every compromise is strengthening the relationship, every difficult conversation is building something permanent. But the human mind doesn't store affection like a savings account. It doesn't keep adding emotional deposits until one day loyalty becomes impossible to break. Instead, familiarity quietly changes the meaning of everything you do. The more predictable your love becomes, the less conscious attention it receives. What once felt extraordinary slowly becomes the expected background of their life, like a heartbeat that is only noticed when it stops. This is why someone can sincerely appreciate you and still become emotionally drawn somewhere else. Appreciation and attraction are not the same psychological experience. Appreciation creates comfort. Attraction creates movement. Comfort keeps life stable, but movement makes people feel emotionally awake. If someone has quietly begun feeling disconnected from themselves, they don't always search for a better partner. They search for a different emotional mirror. They mistake a new emotional state for a better relationship. Most people never realize they weren't competing against another person. They were competing against the version of themselves that no longer made the other person feel emotionally alive. The replacement simply arrived carrying novelty, uncertainty, and possibility. Those three things often feel like chemistry, even when they have nothing to do with genuine compatibility. That's why their decision can seem irrational from the outside. They walk away from stability toward uncertainty. They abandon years of history for someone they've barely known. Everyone watching assumes they're making a mistake, but psychologically, they aren't choosing logic. They're choosing emotion. Human beings almost always move toward whatever temporarily changes the way they feel about themselves. That realization hurts because it removes the comforting fantasy that perfect behavior guarantees permanent love. It doesn't. You can be patient without being unforgettable. You can be faithful without remaining emotionally magnetic. You can do everything right while someone quietly begins associating you with the version of themselves they've grown tired of becoming. People don't always leave because they stop loving you. Sometimes they leave because they no longer recognize themselves beside you. The tragedy is that neither of you notices when this transformation begins. It doesn't arrive with betrayal or arguments. It arrives through repetition. Every routine conversation, every predictable weekend, every familiar silence slowly convinces the brain that tomorrow will feel exactly like today. The relationship hasn't become unhealthy. It has become psychologically invisible. The mind is strangely adaptive. Anything repeated often enough loses emotional intensity. This protects us from constant stimulation, but it also creates a dangerous illusion inside relationships. The person who once made your heart race slowly becomes part of the emotional furniture of your everyday existence. They haven't changed nearly as much as your nervous system has changed its response to them. Then someone unexpected enters the picture. They aren't necessarily wiser, kinder, or more attractive. They simply interrupt the emotional pattern. Suddenly curiosity returns. Imagination returns. Uncertainty returns. Every interaction demands attention because nothing is predictable yet. The brain interprets this heightened awareness as profound emotional connection, even when it's simply reacting to novelty. This is why replacements often seem confusing. Friends ask, "What do they have that you didn't?" They're asking the wrong question. The real question is, what emotional state did they awaken that had been asleep for years? Because that's what people chase. Not people. Feelings. And feelings are terrifying because they don't obey fairness. Some people believe that if they become indispensable, they'll become impossible to replace. So they solve every problem before it's spoken. They become endlessly available. They remove every obstacle from the other person's life. Slowly, almost without realizing it, they stop existing as an independent human being and become an emotional service. Ironically, the more indispensable they become, the less mystery remains. Their entire emotional landscape becomes predictable. Predictability feels safe. But safety alone rarely sustains fascination. Fascination requires discovery. Discovery requires distance. Without realizing it, many relationships slowly eliminate every space where curiosity could survive. Everything becomes known. Every reaction becomes expected. Every emotional rhythm becomes familiar. Nothing surprises the imagination anymore. When curiosity dies, people often assume love has died too. It hasn't. Curiosity and love simply stopped living in the same room. This is why someone can sincerely say they still care about you while walking towards someone else. They're not always lying. They're describing two different emotional systems. Care belongs to memory. Desire belongs to anticipation. One remembers what already exists. The other reaches toward what still feels unknown. That difference destroys countless relationships because nobody notices it while it's happening. After they leave, your mind begins replaying every conversation, every vacation, every ordinary afternoon. You search for the exact moment everything changed. You imagine there must have been one mistake large enough to explain such a painful ending. Usually there wasn't. Relationships rarely collapse from one catastrophic event. They erode through invisible emotional drift. Tiny shifts accumulate beneath everyday life until one person wakes up emotionally somewhere they never consciously intended to go. By the time they physically leave, they've often been psychologically leaving for months. Not because they planned to. Because attention quietly migrated elsewhere. Attention is one of the most misunderstood forces in human psychology. Wherever attention repeatedly goes, emotional importance eventually follows. The heart often convinces itself it simply discovered a new love, when in reality it slowly built one through repeated emotional focus. That's why the ending feels so sudden only to the person left behind. The one leaving has been living inside the ending long before it became visible. And that invisible timeline is almost impossible to forgive because you never had the chance to experience it alongside them. The hardest part isn't losing them. It's realizing they had already begun living in a different emotional world while still standing beside you. That realization changes every memory afterward. Moments that once felt genuine suddenly become suspicious. Smiles become evidence. Silences become clues. Even happy memories begin feeling counterfeit because your brain desperately wants the past to explain the present. But memory is not an investigator. Memory is a storyteller. That's why heartbreak doesn't only change the future. It edits the past. Perhaps the most haunting realization comes much later. You eventually understand they didn't choose someone else because that person completed them. They chose someone else because that relationship allowed them to temporarily escape the emotional identity they had begun associating with yours. The new relationship became less about love and more about psychological reinvention. For a while, everything feels alive again. Every conversation feels meaningful. Every glance feels electric. Every uncertainty feels romantic. But novelty has a hidden expiration date. Eventually routines return. Predictability returns. Familiarity returns. The same human brain that once glorified the new relationship begins adapting again, because adaptation is what minds are designed to do. This is why so many people spend their lives confusing emotional renewal with emotional permanence. They aren't chasing better partners. They're chasing the feeling of becoming someone new. And no relationship can permanently provide that feeling. Eventually every love becomes ordinary enough for the mind to stop noticing its miracles. That's when the cycle begins again. Not because people are evil. Because human perception quietly normalizes almost everything it keeps. The painful irony is that the person who left may one day remember you with extraordinary clarity. Not because they suddenly realized your worth, but because memory removes routine. Once you're gone, your predictable presence disappears. The mind stops experiencing you as everyday reality and starts reconstructing you as emotional history. Things that once felt ordinary suddenly gain emotional weight because absence changes perception in ways presence never could. But by then, the question no longer matters. Because the real tragedy was never that they chose someone else. The real tragedy was believing their choice defined your value. It never did. It only revealed where their emotional attention had traveled. Nothing more. Nothing less. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all. Someone can deeply love who you were, sincerely appreciate everything you gave, honestly cherish the memories you built together, and still choose another path because they were chasing a different version of themselves. Not every ending has a villain. Sometimes it has two people standing beside each other while quietly becoming strangers to the identities they once shared. That is why they chose someone else. Not because you were impossible to love, but because the person they were trying to become no longer recognized the life they had built with you. And once that silent transformation is complete, no amount of history can convince someone to stay inside a version of themselves they've already decided to leave behind. That's the part heartbreak never says out loud. The person who walked away wasn't always escaping you. Sometimes, they were trying to escape the person they had become while loving you.